I think it's widely established by anybody who has known me more than 10 minutes that semantics and language really matter to me.
It's time to make some room in your headspace. This is Words Matter with Amy Guth.
I want to start by saying that the term labor shortage is so fucking dumb. It drives me crazy because it is very unsubtly normalizing putting corporate needs over the humans that run the corporation, right? Because what it's really saying, it's kind of telling on the company as saying like, hey, we have a situation in which our job descriptions and our hiring is so out of line with what is reasonably expected by the people qualified to do that job that nobody wants to come work for us, or we're not getting enough people who are willing to come work for us. So when companies are whining about a labor shortage, and I realize that's a risk saying that, being the host of a business podcast, but I don't care, and I'm saying it because this really bothers me. Semantics and language, I think it's widely established by anybody who has known me more than 10 minutes, that semantics and language really matter to me. I've written about this many times, that we kind of get into this like intellectually lazy thing where we just kind of grab a word and use it casually because we've all kind of agreed culturally that's the shorthand for this thing. And labor shortage is a bullshit one. It really is, because there's not a labor shortage. Because that's implying there are fewer people, which might be the case if you're in a very new cutting edge industry. Like, yeah, okay, there may not be that many people who can deal with AI because it's a new industry, or crypto or whatever, although both of those have kind of been around a while, and people have definitely caught up. But you know what I'm saying? Like, if an industry has changed, you might have to adapt some skills. But nonetheless, to me, every time I hear a leader saying, oh, we have this labor shortage, or somebody in the industry saying, industry-wide, we have this labor shortage. You know, take nursing, for example. There are so many qualified nurses. It's just they all got treated like shit for a very long time, and underappreciated and underpaid and underworked and given huge workloads. And then the pandemic hit and it was even more intolerable. So to me, it's not a labor shortage. It is a matter of giving people a job they want to take. People want to do things, right? Humans want meaning in their lives through art and work and things that we do. People want that. So this narrative like, oh, people don't want to work is complete bullshit. In particular, the pandemic gave people a fucking minute to sit down and realize like, wow, the way I've been going at it is killing me. It's too much. And I haven't been living. My whole life revolves around work, right? And bosses can say, oh, work-life balance, all they want, but there are fewer living that, right? I mean, how many people get emails and texts and work requests after 5 p.m., right? Like most of us do. And I always have one like pet language semantics thing that I like always have an axe to grind about some phrase. I mean, I bitched about the term lockdown. I can't stand that because prior to the pandemic, lockdowns meant something that happened in prison when there was a major security breach, right? When there was a major crisis happening. What we mean is public safety measures. And I think saying like lockdown makes us all sound resentful of it. Like nobody was psyched about it. It was a pandemic. But I think there's language we can use that implies those of us who could did our part, and we were happy to participate in trying to lessen the impact of it. Like you could just say staying home. You could say when we were staying home during COVID, when we were using public safety measures, when we were fighting the pandemic by staying home. Like there's a lot of ways to say it, but lockdown implies kind of zero personal agency and an unwillingness to want to help our neighbors. We're kind of hearing it too with like when bosses are saying return to work implies people haven't been working. And there's plenty of data that suggests that companies rather who have realized you can't unring a bell and have listened to their workers and treated them like adults and said, I didn't hire you to put your ass in a seat from 9 to 5. I hired you to do this job. I don't care where you do it from. They're doing much better revenue-wise. Words matter. There's a difference in saying going back to work and returning to in-person work, right? There's a difference. And the reason I grind that axe so much is because words matter because they shape narrative. And when a narrative is shaped, that dictates public behavior, that can dictate policy. And ultimately, that's how history gets written. That's how history is put on the books as recorded, right? We all know that there's not one singular truth of history. There are many, many perspectives in history, and we generally record the dominant narrative. And so being really mindful about how we participate in the dominant narrative is really fucking important. Like labor shortage, because you're saying like the human needs don't matter and the corporate needs do. Another thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately is seasonal living. So I've been out in Los Angeles since mid-June. And certainly the seasons are subtle here. They do exist. People say, oh, there's no season out here in LA. I mean, generally, I like to joke when people say, how's LA? I say, same as every day, 72 and sunny. And I joke, but also, you know, I do see leaves turn. I do see the nights feeling colder. I do smell fireplaces this time of year. You know, there is some seasonality to it. It's not a big ass snowstorm like back in Chicago it was. It's not the big color display that trees put on in Chicago and other parts of the world, but it's subtle. But that subtlety is making me look a little harder for it, because it's very easy in a place with very unsubtle seasons like Chicago and New York and other places I've lived, right? It's you don't have to think about it. Seasonality is on you, and there it is. But I think especially in the world that we live in, where we can get any food anytime we want, any time of year, because of chemical ripening and global shipping from you know, the southern hemisphere where it is warmer. We can get whatever we want in winter, where we can get frozen food for any food we want, where, you know, we can have light anytime because of electricity. I think we're just so disconnected from that. I find myself really craving that kind of seasonality. And I think it's so much deeper than just like, okay, I'm only going to eat like, I don't know, watermelon and summertimey stuff in the summer, and I'm going to eat, you know, winter kind of foods in the winter. I think it's deeper than that. And I think it's kind of about our own cycles as humans. And I don't mean just for people who menstruate, but I mean, you know, in the winter, we talk about being tired and wanting to go to sleep early because the nighttime comes early. Why don't we just lean on that? The short answer is capitalism and American culture, or Western culture anyway, right? But what if we allowed ourselves to kind of go inward and regroup a little bit as the fall set in and started to give into winter, and let ourselves kind of have a very internal experience of rest and restoration? And then, you know, in the spring, we have kind of this burst of energy. I mean, I always joke that I always think I'm broken. And then about April, I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I just needed sunlight, right? What if instead of making that like a personal disorder, you know, a personal failing, what if we leaned into that seasonality more? And I'm thinking a lot about my grandfather, because he was a farmer. He very much listened to that because he had to, right? He had to be very attuned to what the natural world was telling him and not the built world, because that's how he made his living and that's how he kept his farm healthy and well. And he and my grandmother, in addition to farming, they also grew a lot of their own food in their individual, kind of their own personal garden. And they had different flavors that they leaned on for different times of the year, because at some times of the year, this is a, you know, crunchy snap pea fresh from the vine. And then other times it was like the vegetables that they had put up in jars, and now they're really delicious stewed or something like that, right? In a big hearty soup, things like that. So it is about food, but I think it's also about checking in and saying, what do I need right now? You know, what I need in the summer might be a bunch of sunlight and activity and adventure, but in the winter, what I need right now might be quiet and dark and candles and reading more and tucking into myself and strategizing what I want for the next season. And I like this idea. I was reading a bunch of blog posts on the topic, and one of them was sort of equating living more seasonally with the process of like restoring natural habitats and rewilding, and how technology has just made us drift so far from our kind of internal compass and made us really disconnected from the earth. And I think that's really interesting. And another blogger kind of referred to the practice of living seasonally as like the idea of a lifestyle that embraces change, which I really love because, change is a thing a lot of people struggle with. It has never been that for me. I've always really liked change. In fact, I need it. Too much consistency and I start feeling really stagnant. I have to feel like I'm moving forward. I have to feel change and some kind of sense of like progress. And I think that's maybe kind of part of the artist mind of like, I need to create a thing and then create another thing and then create another. But anyway, that's really speaking to me. So I'm going to be exploring that a lot more, certainly. Lastly, also, speaking of things I put in my newsletter, I also want to mention some stuff I'm watching. So I finally watched the David Bowie documentary, Moonage Daydream. It's really beautiful. It's very artfully done. It was Brett Morgan was the director and editor and producer. This guy wore a lot of hats. And he also did Montage of Heck, right, which is a very artfully done, and there's a lot of cool art elements and animation and stuff. So the Bowie documentary is kind of the acid trip that you would expect it to be. It's really beautifully done. But what I thought was cool, it's narrated by Bowie himself through old interviews and concert footage. Not AI, not manufactured. It's all him talking. Morgan kind of lets Bowie be his own testament of self.
Are you there, David?
And it's really beautifully done.
You're aware of a deeper existence.
Are you there, David? Are you there, David? Are you there, David?
Maybe a temporary reassurance that indeed there is no beginning, no end. And you find yourself struggling to comprehend a deep mystery.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade. And the papers want to know whose shirts you wear.
Ever since I was 16, I was determined we'd have the greatest adventure that only one person could ever have.
I'm an alligator. I'm a mama papa calling for you. I'm the space invader. I'll be a rock and roller bitch for you.
Also watched the Beckham documentary series. That's from Fisher Stevens, which if you think of Fisher Stevens as the actor, you're like, who, what? Huh? He directed that? He has done a lot of documentary. He is award-winning in that respect, and he did a really beautiful job in this. There's some beautiful interview work, camera work in the interviews with this, and some cool kind of very human details I like that you can hear Fisher Stevens talking off camera a couple of times. And I just think I didn't know a lot about David Beckham. I just knew he was, this good-looking dude who was a footballer and married Posh Spice. That's really all I knew about him. But it really paints this very human picture of him. And it's a 4-part series, so it's a quick watch. It's really interesting.
Tonight we bring you the story of how David Beckham became a global phenomenon.
It's really entertaining when the circus comes to town, right? Unless you're in it.
It's all right, Buster. They can't get in the car. We were drowning.
But he just kept going.
But also this show called Obituary. It's Irish, it's dark and moody, and it's smart, and it's about a journalist in a small and struggling newsroom in the small town.
Kilraven, population 5,000 and falling. But under that veneer of nothingness, there's a ton of weird shit going on.
Wake up! So this is where they found Maria Riedel's body.
Who did this to you?
And essentially the newsroom cutbacks take her off salary and put her on a per piece, fee. She's paid a freelance fee per piece, but she's the obituary writer. So how do you drum up business when you're the obituary writer?
Circulation is down. You'll get 200 an obit.
How will I live?
Maybe you should start killing people.
Maybe I can start with you.
Exactly. You probably heard me name-dropping my newsletter and obviously could not stop thinking about it, so you can subscribe to that occasional email roundup of 5 things to read, watch, and listen to by heading to amyguth.com, and you can subscribe to my writing prompts for weird times, my daily Substack briefs about media literacy and public impact, and nonfiction writing prompts, and you can get that by visiting guth.substack.com.
What's up, besties and bitches? I'm here on Rodeo. Let's do some shopping.